Wednesday, everybody. How are you today? The days are getting really long. Short now, sorry. The night and the dark is getting long and the day is just getting shorter. Felt like only a few weeks ago I was doing some of these kind of outside, with a little bit of sunlight, and now it's already pitch black. So we're definitely noticing the change. Daylight savings is almost gone. Anyway, what I want to talk to you tonight is something that gets brought up quite a lot, and it's a little myth that I like to bust. I don't mind busting a few myths, making it a little bit easier for you to make decisions. So this one's about building inspectors. So we all know how important it is to get a building inspection when you purchase a property. That is a no-brainer. I've talked to you guys about that so many times. You know that the property is the largest financial asset you're going to do. It is crucial you get that building inspection report. All right, but here is the myth. Not all building inspectors are the same. That's right, they're not the same. There are some very different ones out there. They have different qualifications and different things they can provide. I'm going to break it down for you really simple, because often people think building inspector will go through the yellow pages, will get a good price, and that's it. That's not it at all, okay? Remember, this is your most important asset that you're dealing with. So just like you choose other professionals to act for you, you need to do a little bit of homework before you find your building inspector. So they are definitely not all the same. Number one, do they have the correct qualifications? Now, this might sound really obvious, but the answer is not obvious. Just because someone is a builder or they're a tradesperson does not mean that they're actually a qualified building inspector. It actually is an additional qualification that you need to do to be able to issue those reports. Now, that's not to say that your local builder or your mate from footy who is a chippy or someone else may not be able to give you advice, but you can't really rely entirely on that advice because they don't have all the qualifications that they need to be able to give you that advice. All right. So are they a registered building inspector? Super important. Thanks for jumping on, guys. I'm opening up a myth for you that all building inspectors are not the same. And this is why it's so important to find out. Number one, are they a registered, licensed building inspector? Now, why would you say is that so important? This is why. You cannot rely on the advice that they give you. So I'm not saying that your local builder or carpenter, tradesperson, whoever, I mean, we've all got friends that work in those industries that can give that information to you. But unless they are a qualified building inspector, if there is a mistake with the advice that they give you, you actually cannot rely on it. Their advice that they give you is actually not guaranteed unless they are a licensed building inspector. So that's really important. Licensed building inspectors have professional indemnity to be able to give that advice, where a lot of other tradespersons not having that qualifications, they're not covered. So and everybody makes mistakes, and if somebody gives you a bit of a wrong advice, you find out later down the track, 5 years later, that something actually was structurally wrong with the property, you can't go back to that person and speak to them and seek compensation from their insurer if they weren't actually a qualified building inspector. So that is a huge difference, number one right there. It is only those building inspectors that you can really rely on their advice, that it's guaranteed and they have professional indemnity to be able to give that advice. So that's super important. Number two, and this is something a lot of people don't think about, this is about finding out if your chosen building inspector actually has practical experience. Believe it or not, there is a whole range of building inspectors out there that have actually never, to put it bluntly, worked on the tools. So they actually haven't worked building houses, being in there, doing renovations. They haven't done all of that. So they may have learned the theory behind a building inspection and what to look for, but without having those years of experience, they actually don't have the practical experience. There are some building inspectors out there that have done a TAFE course and that is it. This is definitely one of those industries where you need experience. You want to know that your building inspector has years of practical experience before they turned into inspector. You will find a lot of inspectors, they decided they wanted to kind of move away from being on the tools, and so they've moved into doing inspections because it's less impact on their body. They're the really good inspectors. They're the ones that have done years and years ins and out building houses, and they know all the tricks in the trade. They're the good ones. So you want to make sure that your building inspector actually has practical experience. And on the back of that, the next one is, are they actually qualified and do they know how to quote to do repairs, alterations, etc.? And you might think, well, why would I need a building inspector to be able to give that advice? And here's why. If you get a building inspection and in it says, we recommend X, Y, and Z needs to be done, or this needs to be done. If he can then tell you, as a separate document to that, how much that would cost to get done, you're already going to be miles in front. So think about it this way. So the building inspector tells you that there's some work to the retaining wall that would require to be done to make sure that it's safe, blah, 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 blah. Well, instead of having a freak out moment, you don't know how much it's going to cost, etc. If he is a qualified builder that has practical experience, has been able to quote before in the past, he can actually then go on to advise you how much you can estimate something like that would cost. And then it might not be such a big deal. It might be something that, is a couple $100 and you're happy to take on yourself, or it may be something that is, a very large expense, but you have that information to hand and it stops you delaying the process by trying to get somebody else to quote it and bringing someone else, which delays it as well. So that is super important. So building inspector, hi guys, hey William, hey Peter, hey Matt. We're talking about, and there's a few of you here, a few real estate agents that I can see popped on, and what we're talking about is that all building inspectors are not the same, and there's a bit of a myth that they are. So I'm giving everyone some really good tips to make sure that they get the right ones that they can rely on. So we've already said, are they registered as a building inspector? Being a builder, they could be the most brilliant builder. They could have more knowledge than everyone you know. But unless they're a registered building inspector, you cannot rely on their advice. You do not have that professional indemnity for them to be able to give you that advice. Do they have practical experience? Have they been on the tools? Have they done the nitty-gritty from the ground up, learning how to build houses so that they've really got that experience behind them? You really do not want green building inspectors, which I kind of hate to say that because I'm all for, young people out there trying to make a way in a career, but this is one where you really want to have someone that's got a lot of experience. Do they know how to qualify? Have they got any qualifications in estimations, in quoting? So if there is anything wrong, they can give you an idea what it would cost to charge. And to give you another idea, I've seen building inspections that will have faults listed. And then the building inspector, who is very experienced, will phone the purchaser and say, mate, you can go to Bunnings and buy that for $15 and this is what you do to put it on. And so yes, it was a fault, but he's just told you it would cost $15 and this is how you fix it. That is the type of experience that you just can't otherwise accumulate unless you've got that experience. And that's actually something really not that unusual. That leads me straight into the next one. Will the building inspector have a one-on-one chat with you? All right, so it doesn't need to be face-to-face, but a good building inspector will actually have a phone call conversation with you when they've got the report. Really good building inspectors that I know, if they find something that is very severe and in the nature of the defect, they'll actually call you straight away before they do the report. But it's really important that when you've got the report, you've got a building inspector that just doesn't wash their hands of you, they're done, that they will have that conversation with you, because it can be hard sometimes to interpret their definitions in the report. And that's because, and this is the kind of catch-22, a really good building inspector has years of qualification, of practical experience, which means you can appreciate that they're used to speaking in a certain way because they're tradespeople. So they describe things in a way that other tradespeople understand. So when they're preparing a report, they have to prepare it in really clear English, which isn't as natural and as simple to them. And so when they prepare it in clear English, it's really good to have that chat with them so that you're all on the same page as to what it actually means. So that was a long way around it, but it's actually not that uncommon. You know, really good building inspectors, they haven't for 20 years been writing reports. They have been speaking to other professionals in the field using the same terminology. So when they prepare a report for Mr. and Mrs. Smith who are buying a home, they have to dumb it down so that we can all understand it in clear English. And so sometimes context can get a little bit lost. So you want that one-on-one conversation and you want those little tips. Those one-on-one conversations is where you get the little golden nuggets too. They won't put it in a report, I think this property is really good for this age. They won't put it in a report, mate, in 20 years, you might want to look at doing this. Or this was really good, but while I was there, the neighbor was doing this, this, and this, and that could really, this tree that's over the fence, that could really impact you in 5 years. You know, that's just information that you can't get in a report. So you really want to make sure that you have someone that you can have a chat to, yeah? And when we're on that topic, have you checked out their Facebook? Have you checked out their Google reviews? Find out all about them. Ask your agent, ask your conveyancer. That's the best way to know, but definitely get online, have a little Google and see what other people are saying about them. Last of all, do they use an Australian standard report? Now, that might sound like a no-brainer, but there are so many building inspectors out there that do not actually use the Australian standard report. They might use their own little report that they whip up and it's 2 pages and it doesn't have half the information it's supposed to have. And that's because they don't have all those other qualifications and things that we've spoken about. So when you're choosing a building inspector, don't be afraid to ask them for a sample report. It's a normal question. Then you'll also know what information you can expect that you will receive, what they will be looking at, what tools they will use, and what your report will look like. That's actually not that unreasonable. They have millions of precedents there that they can forward to you. So is it an Australian standard? So just to recap, as I said, we all know the importance of a building inspection, but who does that building inspection is actually just as important, and recognizing that all building inspectors are not the same. They need to be qualified and licensed. They need to have professional indemnity insurance so that the advice that they give you is guaranteed. So that years down the track, if they made a mistake that is costly for you, you are able to make claims on their insurance. Do they have practical experience? Have they had the years in the trenches? Have they been on the tools? Have they built a house and they understand what happens in the bricks and mortar by seeing it and feeling it and not just reading it in theory? That one's super important. Will they have a one-on-one catch up with you afterwards, which is just usually a half-hour, 20-minute phone call? So important. And do they use Australian standard form for their report? So important. Well worth looking into. They're definitely not the same. You're about to spend the most money that you have in your life. It's your most important asset. So you need to make sure you've got the right people giving you advice. Okay. I'm going to finish off with a little confession, as I always do. Wednesday's confession of conveyancer is actually something I shared on Instagram as well today. And it was before every client meeting, non-negotiable. I take the time to do 3 centering breaths. And at first, when I started it years ago, I kind of was a little bit hesitant because you think, that it wastes time, but it really doesn't. And what's really interesting about it is by taking those centering breaths, it takes probably 20, 30 seconds and it really sets you up. It makes sure that you disconnect from whatever you were just working on. It helps you to slow your language right down. Often when we're sitting at our desks, we're working like this, we're answering the phone, we're thinking about the next thing, we're continuously going and going. But when we want to sit down and walk into that client meeting, we want to slow right down. We want to make sure that we're so connected and in the moment with that client. And those 3 centering breaths makes that disconnect from what you've just been working on into the next stage. It actually lowers your heart rate. You can feel almost your blood pressure slow down. It's 20-30 seconds. Your client will feel like they are completely have all of your attention. And it also really gets you focused. So when clients are shooting questions at you, you can think really easy on your feet because your mind's not jumbled from everything else beforehand. So 3 centering breaths before every important client meeting. And you can use that any time. If you're about to take an important phone call, if you're about to have an icky conversation with someone, or just sometime you need to be really clear. It's a really good idea. All right. Gang, that's it for Wednesday. I hope there was some great information that you used there. Make sure you keep feeding yourself with all that knowledge. The more knowledge and information that you're getting in during your property journey is really going to make sure that the experience that you have is so much more enjoyable because it's going to be less stressful. All right. Hachi, you've got to watch this one on replay. I just spoke about how to choose a building inspector and about how they are not all the same. So it'll be a good one for you to listen and, share it out if you liked the information. Thank you, Wednesday, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.